Sorry, the quality of this video isn't ideal. I'm kind of doing it from on the road, but I thought I would record a quick video about Israel's attack on Iran. Just a couple of things for context that I think are important to remember. In 2015, the United States signed a nuclear agreement with Iran. It was actually the toughest nuclear inspection regime that any country had ever agreed to. It went beyond the rules of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iran was complying with that agreement according to not only the International Atomic Energy Agency, but also according to the CIA, when the United States itself broke the agreement, violated the agreement under the first Trump administration and left the deal. Now, it's true that that agreement would not necessarily have prevented Iran from building a nuclear weapon in perpetuity, but it clearly delayed Iran from getting a nuclear weapon in a verifiable way for a significant period of time. Now, Israel has launched a military strike against Iran, which will also set back and delay Iran's nuclear program. But think about the consequences of these two strategies side by side, in tandem. By doing this military attack on Iran, Iran seems to me almost certainly now learns the lesson that it needs to go for a nuclear weapon much more aggressively than it did before, because it has seen that the lesson of it not having a nuclear weapon is exactly the same lesson that was learned by Iraq and by Libya, which is that if you don't have a nuclear weapon, rather than being able to have a diplomatic agreement with the West in which you're economically kind of integrated, in fact, what happens is the United States and its allies just bomb you. So instead of being like Libya or Iraq, you desperately want to be like North Korea, a country that has nuclear weapons and therefore has the deterrent so that it won't be bombed. So just as Israel's celebrated nuclear attack on Osirak in Iraq led the Iraqis to double down their efforts to get a nuclear weapon in order so that it couldn't happen again. And indeed, so it was found that on the eve of the Gulf War in 1991 that Iraq was very close to having a nuclear weapon. It seems to me this is likely the consequence of what will happen to Iran here as well. Beyond that, I think that Israel, it seems to me, did this because Israel had this window of opportunity because Hezbollah had been degraded. So the deterrent of Iran from Hezbollah, of a Hezbollah response, was much lower. And also Israel had knocked out Iran's air defenses. So there was this feeling that, well, we can do this now, but if we don't do it now, we won't be able to do it as effectively in the future. And I think Israel is also kind of very self-confident as a result of its kind of pager attack in Lebanon. But this, to me, is just such an example of how Israeli politics works these days, where you have the hammer of military force, and so every problem looks like a nail. So you can congratulate yourself because you're technologically and militarily much stronger than your neighbors. And so when in air wars, like against Lebanon or against Iran, you can have these spectacular technological wizardry and you can feel like you're so powerful and you're solving your problems. But in fact, you're digging yourself into, it seems to me, an even deeper hole, because again, you're setting back Iran's nuclear program, but but not more effectively than you would have through diplomacy. And what are and although this is a tactical military victory, what are the strategic consequences? What are the strategic consequences? If you look at public opinion in Europe and the United States, you see that public opinion is turned against Israel with astonishing rapidity. We now have repeated polls in the United States that show that Israel's popularity is more unpopular than it has been since these polling institutions began doing polling. The Chicago Council of Global Affairs found this year that Israel was less popular than it has been in any poll that the Chicago Council has been doing since it began in the 1970s. It's not just among Democrats. Israel's unfavorability rating Israel is becoming much less popular even among Republicans. Recent poll this year found that among your Republicans under the age of 50, fully 50% of young Republicans now have an unfavorable opinion of Israel. Even in countries like Germany, which have historically been, for obvious reasons, more sympathetic to Israel, you're finding that public opinion is moving very sharply against Israel. Some of this is human rights oriented, but some of it, especially on the American right, is just that people don't want more Middle Eastern wars that could drag in the United States. This is a key part of what Donald Trump was elected on twice, after all. So for this tactical military victory, you are deepening your strategic problem, which is in both Israel and the United States. Israel and sorry, United States and Europe. Europe, which Israel is very reliant on economically, and the United States, which Israel is very reliant on militarily. You are laying the foundations, the conditions for a political environment in which Israel is going to have far less support. Certainly not the unconditional support that it's grown accustomed to. And beyond that, it's just really important to remember again, and I say again and again, in the face of this Israeli and American exceptionalism, so much of this discourse about Israel reminds me of the kind of exceptionalist discourse that existed in the United States after 9/11. That the norms that you create, or perhaps better said, the norms that you break when you act don't have repercussions far beyond you. When the United States decided that it had the right to invade Iraq without Security Council approval, that laid the predicate and the justification for what Russia later did in Georgia and Ukraine. So now look at what Israel is doing. First of all, again, Iran it's a very odious regime, of course, but it is a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and it doesn't have nuclear weapons. Israel is not a member of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. It has hundreds of nuclear weapons, and now it's just attacked Iran on the same logic the United States attacked Iraq in 2003, because Iran could potentially one day be a threat, even though today Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons, and indeed is far weaker than Israel, and indeed has been frankly appeasing Israel. Israel has been striking Iran again and again in recent years, and Iran has been responding very feebly, very weakly, because as even a New York Times op-ed written by two very hawkish Washington analysts, Reuel Marc-Gerecht and Ray Takei, last year said, Iran doesn't want war. Iran has desperately been trying to avoid a war, but Israel has not allowed them to avoid this war, even with this very weak response that Iran has been taking to Israel's military action. So first of all, you have the specter of Israel attacking Iran with no justification that will convince anybody around the world. Secondly, this is in the context in which Israel is also committing in Gaza something that Amnesty International and many legal scholars have called a genocide. And Israel is occupying Lebanon and occupying Syria. It's bombed Syria hundreds of times under this since the new government came in. What do Israel and its supporters think this is doing to the way international politics works? All of these rights that Israel is claiming to itself, right? The right to violate, to attack, to occupy, to bomb other countries again and again, even though they pose, in the case of Syria, in the case of Iran, they pose no immediate threat to Israel whatsoever. To destroy Gaza, even though Hamas is far from being able to carry out anything like October 7th anymore. These things will reverberate throughout the world in terms of the norms that other countries believe that now will apply to them in terms of what they can do. It's very important to think about when a country like Israel acts, what we would do, how we would behave if other countries took these same liberties vis-a-vis Israel that Israel is taking towards them. Unfortunately, we have this exceptionalist discourse in the Jewish community in the United States, which prevents us from thinking this way. But the parameters, the norms that Israel is creating with this intense militarism against other countries that don't pose, or populations that don't pose a threat to Israel, will reverberate not just in the Middle East, but throughout the world, I'm afraid, for years to come.